There is a quiet kind of loneliness that doesn't come from being alone. It comes from being surrounded yet unseen, from conversations that skim the surface while the mind lives in depth. Some people move through life sensing layers others never notice. Patterns beneath behavior, meaning beneath words, silence beneath noise. And over time, that awareness creates distance. Not because they withdraw, but because few are willing to meet them where they live mentally and emotionally. In a world that rewards speed over reflection, reaction over understanding, depth becomes isolating. Intelligence, especially emotional and perceptual intelligence, is not always celebrated. Often it is misunderstood. This is not a story about superiority. It is a story about mismatch. About what happens when a deep inner world exists in a culture built for shallow exchange. Some people notice the world differently from the very beginning. It is not a loud awareness, not the kind that demands attention. It is quiet, almost imperceptible, like the subtle shift of light across a room or the faint tremor in someone's voice before words arrive. From early childhood, they sense layers in ordinary moments, emotions unspoken, intentions unarticulated, the invisible threads connecting people and events. Others rush past, focused on what is immediate, what is simple, what is performable. They, however, linger in the in-between. They perceive the texture of experience, the tension beneath a smile, the hesitation in a step. This heightened perception is not a conscious choice at first, it simply exists. A nervous system tuned to nuance, a mind compelled to observe. While peers chase external stimuli, games, laughter, fleeting attention, they remain still, noticing the patterns others cannot name. They hear the half-uttered thoughts, see the unsaid exchanges, and feel the subtle emotional currents that ripple through even the most ordinary spaces. The first recognition comes not with fanfare, but as a quiet realization. It is the moment they understand. No one else is seeing quite what they see. Conversations feel thin. Social rituals feel repetitive. The world seems simultaneously vivid and isolating. This is the beginning of the awareness that their intelligence, their perception, is not always met with resonance. They are capable of noticing complexity long before others register it. A joke may amuse, but they see the undertone of tension behind the laughter. A compliment may land lightly, but they sense the unspoken expectation entwined with it. This awareness does not arrive without cost. They begin to feel the difference between their interior world and the exterior one. Early friendships are often mismatched. Playgrounds and classrooms become spaces where energy is spent translating inner depth into digestible forms. They learn, slowly, that the act of noticing, of feeling, observing, understanding can be exhausting when the majority does not share the same attention. It is as though the mind is living at one pace while the surrounding world moves at another. And yet, this recognition is also a kind of revelation. They begin to see that depth, though isolating at times, carries its own clarity. In observing before reacting and understanding before speaking, they cultivate an inner rhythm that others rarely develop. Their nervous system learns patience. Their attention becomes selective. The world, in its chaos and noise, sharpens their capacity for empathy, insight, and introspection. They learn the delicate art of holding perception without spilling it carelessly, of knowing without needing constant affirmation. By the time they enter adolescence, the first recognition has solidified into a pattern. Depth is not optional. It is inherent. They cannot unsee what they see. They cannot unhear the subtleties that most ignore. And though they may seek companionship, they increasingly sense that most social structures are designed for speed, simplicity, and performative interaction, not the slow, layered observation they inhabit. In this quiet realization, a paradox emerges. Loneliness begins to feel less like absence and more like consequence. The deeper their awareness, the more often they encounter spaces unprepared for it. The more sharply they perceive, the more mismatched their connections become. Yet this is not a weakness. It is the first step towards self-understanding. It is the recognition that living with depth requires careful navigation. It is the acknowledgement that to truly understand the world and to be understood in return, one must first accept the solitude inherent in perception. This is the first recognition. The quiet moment when intelligence, sensitivity, and awareness intersect. And the individual realizes that seeing clearly, feeling deeply, and thinking broadly is both a gift and a distance. It is here in this tension between internal richness and external simplicity that the journey begins. The difference becomes visible not in grand gestures but in subtle shifts of behavior. It starts in the ways they occupy space, how their eyes linger on the details others overlook, how their hands move with intention rather than habit, how their presence is felt more than it is announced. To an outside observer, they may appear quiet, reserved, or even distant. Yet every pause, every glance, every measured gesture is deliberate. It is an orchestration of awareness honed over years. Early experiences teach them that engagement carries energy, that attention is finite, and that giving too much to the wrong stimuli can fragment the mind. While peers scatter their focus across social media, casual interactions, and fleeting entertainment, they learn to conserve their interior coherence. Every conversation, every interaction becomes a choice rather than a default. They do not react to the world impulsively. They absorb, process, and respond selectively. Their boundaries are subtle but firm, shaped not by defiance but by necessity. This difference often becomes more apparent in adolescence. Social gatherings, once thrilling in their novelty, now feel overwhelming. Noise, rapid chatter, and performance-driven interactions create dissonance. They notice the way laughter sometimes masks anxiety, how smiles can conceal tension, how words may contradict intention. The pace of social life feels too hurried, too shallow, too fragmented. They begin to step back, not from people, but from the structures that demand constant engagement. By withdrawing slightly, they gain clarity. They observe the patterns of behavior around them and recognize the emotional currents at play. They see how opinions are influenced by visibility, how popularity can overshadow truth, and how social reward often favors the loudest rather than the wisest. It is not cynicism. It is perception. And with perception comes a quiet loneliness, a sense that their depth is both a gift and a barrier. Yet in this difference, there is power. They begin to understand that emotional energy is precious, that connection is not measured by quantity, but by quality. They notice how micro-expressions communicate more than words, how timing shapes trust, and how presence can be more revealing than performance. This awareness allows them to navigate relationships with precision, to choose who receives their attention, and to cultivate intimacy selectively. Their interactions become less frequent, but more meaningful, less reactive, but more insightful. This stage of life also reveals the cost of difference. They may be misunderstood, labeled as aloof, shy, or disengaged. Peers may interpret their quiet observation as indifference. Family may question their social habits. Teachers may mistake their focus for disinterest. Yet each of these misinterpretations reinforces the necessity of their approach. They begin to realize that to remain whole in a world that rewards visibility, they must honor their own rhythm rather than conform to external expectations. And so, the difference is no longer merely internal. It shapes how they move through life, how they form bonds, and how they perceive the broader world. It is a difference born of early attunement, refined by careful observation, and sustained by choice. It is the understanding that presence without performance is both rare and vital. That depth requires solitude, and that meaningful connection demands both discernment and patience. In this awareness, they begin to see themselves not as outsiders, but as stewards of their own attention. They recognize the distinction between being visible and being understood, between being heard and being acknowledged. The difference is subtle, yet profound. It marks the beginning of a life lived intentionally, a life where depth, clarity, and inner coherence are not accidental, but cultivated. And in this cultivation lies the foundation of the psychological patterns that define them, patterns that will carry into adulthood, shaping relationships, perception, and the experience of the world. Beneath the quiet exterior lies a mind that is constantly working, not with frantic urgency, but with attentive precision. For those who feel deeply in a world that often skims surfaces, every encounter, every observation, every nuance carries weight. Their attention is not divided lightly. It is measured, conserved, and invested with intention. The world outside may demand immediacy, constant response, and outward display, but their inner life moves with a slower, more deliberate rhythm. The inner mechanics of their cognition are shaped by a sensitivity to patterns. in speech, in movement, in energy. Micro-expressions, the cadence of voices, the subtle shifts in posture, all register with an acuity that often goes unnoticed. To them, the external world is a complex tapestry, every thread connected to another, every gesture a signal that informs understanding. While others navigate socially through reaction and convention, they navigate through anticipation and reflection. They are attuned to emotional currents long before they manifest overtly, often perceiving tension, hesitation, or unease that no one else notices. This sensitivity carries both insight and burden. Because their nervous system is tuned to detail, overstimulation arrives quickly. Crowds, rapid-fire conversations, and persistent social noise drain them in ways invisible to others. The brain, in its heightened attentiveness, becomes susceptible to the constant feedback loops of distraction. Emotional information is absorbed and processed at multiple levels simultaneously, demanding mental space that is rarely granted by a fast-paced, shallow environment. This is why solitude is not merely a preference. It is a necessity. Quiet allows recalibration, integration, and the preservation of coherence. Internally, they engage in continual assessment. They weigh intentions, anticipate outcomes, and interpret behaviors with subtlety. Every interaction is filtered through layers of perception and judgment, not in a critical sense, but as a form of careful engagement with reality. Their empathy is precise, their response is measured. They do not react impulsively. They respond when the context, timing, and clarity align. Social engagement is therefore an exercise of discernment rather than performance, of choice rather than obligation. The inner mechanics extend to self-regulation. They understand the relationship between attention, energy, and emotional stability. They know when to observe, when to retreat, and when to engage. Distraction is costly. Overexposure is draining. Emotional resonance must be protected. This knowledge, often gained through years of careful observation and reflection, becomes a guiding framework for daily life. It shapes their habits, their relationships, and their approach to challenges. Yet, this complex interior is rarely visible. Outsiders may perceive only quietness or reticence, missing the intricate orchestration happening beneath the surface. They may be misunderstood as aloof or disinterested when in reality, every choice is deliberate, every pause intentional. Their world is rich with understanding, threaded with empathy, and woven with insight that only emerges through patience and attentiveness. In essence, the inner mechanics are both shield and compass. They allow these individuals to navigate a shallow world without losing themselves, to maintain depth where others flounder in superficiality. They preserve integrity by conserving attention, sustain connection through careful listening, and protect emotional equilibrium through deliberate awareness. Their psychological architecture is a testament to the value of observation over reaction, depth over display, and understanding over mere visibility. Through these internal mechanisms, they cultivate a form of presence that is profound yet unobtrusive. They engage fully, not performatively. They notice deeply, not loudly, and in a world that prizes immediacy and spectacle, the quiet mastery of their inner life becomes the foundation of a life that is intentional, coherent, and deeply human. To be highly aware in a world that celebrates distraction as both a gift and a burden. Those who notice deeply often carry the echoes of every interaction, every subtle shift in tone, every unspoken emotion. While others skim the surface, they inhabit the depths, registering the undercurrents that define human experience. This awareness allows for insight, empathy, and foresight, but it also comes with a persistent weight, a quiet gravity that shapes how they move through life. Every conversation, every gesture, every glance is cataloged with precision. They sense what is felt but unsaid, the tension that lingers between words, the joy that flickers behind hesitation. The mind is never idle. Even in silence, it continues to parse, interpret, and anticipate. While this attunement allows them to connect profoundly with others, it also means that overstimulation arrives quickly. Crowds, abrupt noises, or shallow social engagement can feel draining, as if the nervous system is absorbing more than it can release. This weight of awareness is not merely emotional, it is physiological. Heightened sensitivity to subtleties engages both the mind and the body. The heart quickens at cues others miss, muscles tense with tension that has yet to be verbalized, and sleep can become disrupted by the lingering impressions of the day. They carry the energy of the world inside them, processing not only their own experiences, but also the unspoken experiences of those around them. Awareness becomes an invisible labor, a constant management of internal and external stimuli that most never consider. And yet, they do not wish to escape this burden. The very perception that weighs on them is what grants clarity, connection, and insight. It allows them to navigate complexity with discernment, to respond rather than react, and to understand without judgment. Awareness is their compass. It guides interactions, informs choices, and illuminates patterns invisible to the inattentive eye. But the cost is careful calibration, knowing when to engage, when to withdraw, and how to preserve the integrity of the self while holding space for others. This tension shapes their social presence. They may appear quiet, distant, or introspective to the casual observer, yet this is not withdrawal. It is deliberate containment, a method of maintaining equilibrium amidst overwhelming stimuli. By limiting exposure, they safeguard the coherence of thought and the stability of feeling. Their silence is not emptiness, it is protection, a boundary that honors both their capacity and their limits. The burden extends to empathy. Deep awareness makes them susceptible to the emotional weight of others. They feel sorrow, joy, anxiety, and tension as if it were their own, often before any words are spoken. While this capacity enriches relationships and fosters understanding, it also demands care. They must navigate the fine line between absorbing information and being consumed by it, between perceiving truth and losing themselves in the world's noise. Yet, over time, the weight becomes part of their rhythm. They learn to hold complexity without collapse, to process without becoming paralyzed, to respond without overextending. Awareness transforms from a burden into a tool, a lens through which life is interpreted, relationships are understood, and decisions are made with subtlety and precision. It cultivates patience, discernment, and a profound capacity for presence. The weight of awareness, though heavy, is also what allows them to thrive. It creates depth where others skim, wisdom where others react, and understanding where others misperceive. It is a quiet, invisible strength, shaping not only how they see the world, but how they inhabit it. In a society that prizes noise, speed, and spectacle, their capacity to perceive deeply, carry weight silently, and maintain internal coherence becomes a rare form of resilience, an unseen architecture that sustains their humanity while revealing the hidden patterns of everyone around them. Solitude is not absence. It is not emptiness. For the highly perceptive, it is a threshold, a space where the mind and heart can disentangle themselves from the relentless rhythm of external demands. The turning point often comes quietly, an accumulation of moments when the weight of observation becomes too much to share, when the noise of the world eclipses the subtle inner signals they depend upon. Solitude is the necessary retreat, a recalibration of attention, a pause that allows awareness to breathe. In this space, the mind can slow. The nervous system, so accustomed to scanning for subtle shifts in others, can rest from constant vigilance. Thoughts are no longer fragments competing for recognition, they flow and intertwine, revealing patterns and connections that eluded the distracted eye. It is here, in deliberate withdrawal, that insight emerges not as reaction, but as understanding. The quiet observer begins to perceive the contours of their own inner life with the same clarity they once reserved for others. This turning point is rarely dramatic. It is rarely announced. It arrives in the stillness of early mornings, in walks without conversation, in moments when the body feels both relief and tension simultaneously. The realization surfaces. Connection does not always require proximity, understanding does not require performance, and growth does not demand an audience. Solitude is not a retreat from life. It is an engagement with life on deeper terms. Yet, solitude is paradoxical. It can feel like isolation, a confrontation with the absence of external validation. In these moments, loneliness may arise, not as a flaw, but as an echo of the very sensitivity that allows them to perceive deeply. The unfiltered mind can detect absence, gaps, and unmet expectations in ways that the average observer cannot. These feelings are not meant to be eradicated. They are markers, signposts indicating where attention and energy must be recalibrated. In solitude, the quiet observer learns to inhabit both the fullness of life and the subtleties of self without collapsing under the weight of either. During this turning point, decisions crystallize, boundaries previously implicit become conscious choices. The act of saying no, of limiting exposure, of withholding presence from superficial interactions is no longer avoidance, it is intentional preservation. They begin to recognize which connections nourish attention and which fragment it. They discern when empathy becomes overextension and when engagement is meaningful. Solitude reveals the difference between being present and being performative. It is also a moment of courage. In stepping away, the quiet observer risks misunderstanding. Others may misread the silence as indifference or disengagement. They may assume distance equals disinterest, but the turning point reframes these assumptions. Connection is not measured by volume, but by depth. Visibility is not evidence of value. Attention given is sacred and finite. Solitude becomes a declaration of integrity, a choice to protect the self while remaining attuned to others selectively. This period of withdrawal is generative. Creativity resurfaces in the absence of distraction. Emotional clarity emerges as the nervous system slows its constant scanning. Reflection allows values, priorities, and desires to align with reality rather than expectation. Patterns of thought once obscured by social noise become legible. In this turning point, the quiet observer does not retreat from the world. They return to it, armed with a recalibrated sense of self capable of engaging with precision, presence, and authenticity. Solitude, once feared as isolation, becomes a turning point toward mastery. It is the moment where the internal landscape is no longer secondary to external spectacle. It is where awareness, once a burden, becomes a compass. And in this space, the quiet observer finds the balance between being attuned to the world and remaining coherent within themselves, a balance that allows insight, empathy, and meaningful connection to flourish without the cost of fragmentation. Healing does not arrive with fanfare. It unfolds quietly, like light through a fogged window, revealing contours of the self previously obscured by expectation, distraction, and overstimulation. For the highly perceptive who often feel alone in a shallow world, integration is the art of reconciling intensity with presence. The emotional acuity that once made connection challenging now becomes a bridge. Attention, once fragmented by obligation or comparison, is reclaimed. The mind learns to dwell within its own rhythms, to honor its own signals, to recognize the subtle boundaries between observation and absorption. Integration begins with acknowledgement. Every overlooked feeling, every subtle nuance previously internalized is recognized and given space. The quiet observer allows grief, longing, and exhaustion their due, understanding that these states are not weaknesses but facets of a rich inner life. In doing so, the nervous system slowly unlearns constant hypervigilance, replacing it with attuned stillness. Sensitivity becomes not a source of overwhelm, but a lens through which the depth of human experience can be accessed safely. The practice is deliberate, often iterative. There are days when boundaries feel porous, attention stretched thin, emotions amplified. Yet these moments are embraced as markers of growth, not failure. As healing deepens, the quiet observer's relationships shift. They no longer measure intimacy by frequency or visibility, nor value connection by the volume of responses. Instead, they seek alignment of presence, spaces where energy, attention, and authenticity coalesce. Conversations become richer, silences purposeful, gestures intentional. Empathy, once a weight, is now a calibrated instrument. Listening is profound, response measured, and engagement meaningful. The depth they cultivated in solitude is now deployed selectively, transforming interactions from superficial ritual into resonant exchange. Integration also entails reclaiming time and attention. The mind, once scattered across obligations and social signals, begins to inhabit the present fully. Creative impulses resurface not as fleeting curiosities, but as sustained streams of expression. Thought, once overrun by comparison and expectation, gains clarity and flow. Priorities, once externally dictated, are recognized and enacted internally. Healing is the convergence of observation and self-compassion, a state where awareness ceases to be burden and becomes guiding light. Importantly, integration involves a reconciliation with society, not withdrawal, but discernment. The quiet observer does not isolate to escape humanity. They step back to engage more fully, selectively, intentionally. They understand the cost of overexposure and the reward of deliberate presence. They act, speak, and respond not out of compulsion but from insight. Their choices reflect alignment between inner truth and external action, between emotional depth and practical engagement. In this equilibrium, they navigate the world without sacrificing coherence or composure. The path of healing also nurtures self-trust. The quiet observer learns that their perception, once doubted or underestimated, is accurate and reliable. Sensitivity is recalibrated from a source of anxiety into a tool of insight. The nervous system, previously reactive, gains resilience. Emotional responses are measured, awareness precise, and presence unwavering. The mind, freed from the tyranny of constant validation, rests in its own authority, recognizing that authenticity outweighs approval and depth surpasses spectacle. Finally, integration fosters a sense of wholeness. Past isolation, moments of loneliness, and the struggle of hyper-awareness are not erased. They are acknowledged, honored, and woven into a coherent narrative of self. The quiet observer becomes both participant and witness, capable of engaging with life deeply while remaining internally intact. They exist in a state where empathy is sustainable, presence is deliberate, and attention is sacred. The world, once overwhelming in its shallowness, is approached with calm discernment. And in that calm, they find not detachment, but profound connection, first to themselves and then, with deliberate choice, to others. In the quiet aftermath of understanding, there is a space that feels sacred, almost suspended. It is neither loud nor performative, yet it hums with the richness of awareness. For those who navigate life with heightened perception, this space is both refuge and revelation. Here, the mind slows, the nervous system eases, and the soul discovers its rhythm. A rhythm not dictated by external expectation, but by internal attunement. Loneliness, once a shadow that accompanied insight, softens into solitude, a companion that allows reflection rather than isolation. The world, in all its superficial currents, no longer dictates meaning. Meaning arises from careful observation, deliberate presence, and the courage to inhabit one's inner life fully. Closure is not the erasure of struggle, it is the acknowledgement of complexity. The quiet observer has seen the shallow layers of interaction, the fleeting masks of performance, the subtle pressures that shape conduct and thought. They have felt the weight of being different in perception, of sensing dimensions others overlook, of living in a depth that few share. And yet, this awareness, once a source of dissonance, is now a conduit for profound engagement. By accepting the tension between self and society, by valuing reflection over reaction, the individual achieves a harmony that is rare and quietly powerful. Reflection in this sense is both personal and universal. It is the recognition that intelligence, empathy, and perceptiveness are gifts that carry responsibility to honor one's own rhythms, to preserve coherence, and to select engagement with care. It is the understanding that not every interaction needs participation, that not every emotion requires expression, and that not every observation demands action. In this deliberate restraint, presence gains potency and influence deepens without spectacle. The observer learns that being seen is not the measure of worth. Authenticity is. And in embracing that truth, the quiet observer moves with a grace that transcends performance. There is poetry in the unspoken, in the gestures unnoticed, in the small acts of attention that ripple quietly yet profoundly. Every pause, every measured glance, every moment of listening carries weight. Life is no longer a stage for exhibition, but a landscape for subtle navigation. The depth of connection, real, resonant, unhurried, becomes the ultimate measure of relational richness. They recognize that influence is not loudness but resonance, that empathy is not abundance but precision, and that attention is not expendable but sacred. And so in this closing reflection, the quiet observer teaches an enduring lesson that understanding others, truly understanding, is less about observing behavior and more about perceiving presence. It is less about reaction and more about resonance. To comprehend a person fully, one must attend to the invisible patterns, the rhythms beneath speech, the silence between gestures, the currents that shape thought before words are formed. The deep observer sees what is not said, hears what is not spoken, and feels what is not displayed. Ultimately, this journey from perception to insight, from sensitivity to resilience, and from observation to integration illustrates the profound subtlety of human psychology. Intelligence and empathy, when cultivated with care, need not be isolating. They can be grounding. Awareness need not overwhelm. It can stabilize. And solitude need not be loneliness. It can be clarity. In a world that prizes immediacy, visibility, and noise, the quiet observer exemplifies the strength of deliberate presence, the wisdom of reflective engagement, and the beauty of an unhurried life. In the end, the greatest understanding is simple yet elusive. To live fully is to inhabit oneself, to listen deeply, and to engage the world with intention and care. Not for applause, not for recognition, but for the richness of experience itself. And in that quiet mastery, they are never truly alone. They are profoundly connected, first to themselves, and through that connection, to the world in all its subtle, layered complexity.